question is, after Challenger, the President Reagan, and then the Congress got on board with the idea of a replacement vehicle for Challenger, which came pretty quickly. Has the agency approached the President and or Congress this time around to replace Columbia?
Well, first of all, I assure you we'll work with Public Affairs to release whatever we can as soon as we can. So thank you for that. With respect to the orbiter fleet, we have 3 high-performance vehicles remaining in the inventory, and with the existing flight rate, when the Discovery comes out of its major maintenance and we return to flight, we have sufficient orbiters to assemble, operate, maintain, and conduct research on International Space Station. So, to my knowledge, none of us have approached the administration with a request for a replacement for the Columbia.
Okay, let me take a second question from Johnson, and after that one we'll move to the Kennedy Space Center. Do we have another question from Johnson?
Yes, this is Marcia Dunn of the Associated Press. I'm wondering, were either of you gentlemen directly involved in any of the real-time analyses or discussions about the launch debris incident? I'm just wondering whether this issue reached headquarters level, and who was the top person to sign off on not only the conclusion that the damage was believed to be minor, but there was no need for telescope or satellite imagery.
Well, I'll answer first and then turn it over to Mike for his comment. Yes, in fact, we do see the mission evaluation room summaries every single day. We're involved in the mission management team telecons, and so all those issues, as they're known, are bubbled up to the headquarters. We typically try and get technical resolution at the lowest possible level at the most knowledgeable person, and if it means that we have to expand that to a broader community to get the best expert we can on the planet, we'll do that.
That's exactly right. I see the same products, and our staff is routinely participating in those mission evaluation room results, providing headquarters analysis in terms of perspectives on top. And throughout this kind of thing, as I've laid out, we were very aware of the anomaly observed and the data and the analysis that was ongoing. We trust implicitly Ralph Rowe, the chief engineer for the orbiter, and Rod Dittemore as program peoples to make these calls, but certainly this information was presented and reviewed by the headquarters, and we were in complete concurrence with not only their assessment, but their plan ahead.
We're going to leave this press briefing for just a moment now to take you to another part of the White House where White House spokesperson Ari Fleischer has now stepped up to the podium for his daily briefing. Let's listen in.
Good afternoon. In-flight anomaly list going back to STS-1 for us too. I believe that's electronic if we can get that as part of your openness.
Minutes in the Oval Office. He is, as we speak, having lunch with the newly elected members of the House of Representatives, Democrats and Republicans, and then he will
contracting world who has issues and problems going to the decision-making process involving the clearing of the foam issue and the hit. And are you looking into the decision-making process as an issue, sort of like Challenger looked into overall management problems of decision-making?
Well, first of all, let me assure you that we will make every attempt to gather every scrap of evidence that we can. I'm really not qualified to comment on the Whistleblower Act or any of that. And
we want to advise you that we're going to stick with our coverage here of the NASA press briefing. But as you can see there on the right side of your screen, the regular daily White House press briefing is now getting underway. And Press Secretary Ari Fleischer there telling the press about President Bush's meeting this morning with NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe. And we're going to keep our ears open on that, and once any news does come out of that briefing at the White House, we'll deliver that to you. We'll have coverage of it. As a matter of fact, we're going to go ahead and dip into it right now and at least listen in at this particular point.
That Iraq possesses weapons of mass destruction, particularly chemical and biological weapons. And, of course, the President agrees with what Colin Powell has written.
So he does agree that there isn't one thing that would...
I think the reason that we know Saddam Hussein possesses chemical and biological weapons is from a wide variety of means. That's how we know.
On that issue, is the administration willing to join Great Britain in seeking a UN resolution that would set a date certain for complete Iraqi compliance?
Well, as the President said Friday, standing with Prime Minister Blair, a second resolution would be welcome so long as it accomplishes the mission, and the mission is the disarmament of Saddam Hussein. And so it remains something that the President has expressed very clearly, that under his authority in the Constitution as Commander-in-Chief, and under 1441, he already has existing authority should he make the decision. But the President, of course, is in the process of consultation with our allies, and you'll see a series more meetings, consultative process with our allies to determine precisely what the next course of events should be.
Can you go back to the shuttle? Can you give us an idea of what Administrator O'Keefe said to the President? And also in connection with the shuttle, the budget envisions an increase, which went to the printer before, obviously, the disaster. Envisions an increase in the shuttle program of 23%. Is that the President's way of saying that the shuttle program was underfunded before?
One, on the funding issue, as you know, funding for the NASA budget in total will go from $15 billion in 3 to 15.5, or $469 million in fiscal year 2004. Funding for the space shuttle itself will go from $3.2 billion to $3.9 billion under the budget, as was proposed this morning, as was prepared prior to the disaster involving the Columbia. Having said that, I don't know that anybody can make any conclusions about money at this point. The investigation is just beginning, and as Sean O'Keefe said to the President, all causes will be evaluated, all causes. It is vital. This country owes it to the people who lost their lives, to those people whose families left behind, and to the astronauts who lie ready and waiting to go on their next mission, to explore every possible reason why this could have happened. And I think it's impossible to make any judgments at this point. So those are the facts of the budget, but I think it still is too soon to say anything.
Why the increase, then? What's the justification for the shuttle program in particular?
Well, as Director Daniels walked through at his briefing, there were a series of components inside NASA that involve various aspects of the space shuttle that all are going to receive the funding designated. The funding for the last decade was relatively flat. In fact, there was a decline over the last decade, and now there is an increase in the funding. Funding for the International Space Station, as you know, had run into a series of cost overruns. That has been addressed, and the combined total leads to a budget of NASA that is increasing. But again, this administration is making no conclusions about whether the funding over the last decade or the increase in funding has anything to do with what took place in the Columbia. It'd be premature and unwise to make any judgments about that at this time. John?
The Space Shuttle program lost a quarter of its fleet on Saturday morning, and if the Space Shuttle is the vehicle to be relied on for at least the next decade to build the International Space Station, the President wants to continue the journey into space. Is he at all considering an appropriation to build another shuttle?
Well, again, it's too soon to say. This just took place. It's very important to work with Congress on this as well, to hear Congress's thoughts and opinions, but it's too soon to say. But it's fair to say, and as the President said in his meeting with Mr. O'Keefe, the President is committed to the future of space exploration. He is committed to the future of the men and women of NASA and the international collaboration that has allowed mankind to explore space to the degrees that we have and the degrees we continue to do so and will do so.
Is it even possible to consider building another shuttle because the apparatus to manufacture the parts to a large degree has been shut down?
No, as I indicated, it's too soon to say. Randy?
Was there a need, or does the President think it may be time to look at accelerating the search for a new generation of space planes to replace the shuttle, given the age of the fleet?
Well, again, I'm not going to, 2 days after the explosion, lead to any conclusions for anybody in the government about what the next steps should be. This has to be a review. Well, I think first it's important to allow the independent panel and the internal NASA panel to conduct their investigations. Let's find out what the cause of the accident was before reaching conclusions about what the next course in space exploration should be. But the principal point that I want to emphasize is the President is determined to continue mankind's exploration of space. David?
Ari, one quick question on Korea and then one on the shuttle. On North Korea, was the president apprised of or involved in the decision to send additional air power to the region so that you could act as, I think, what the Pentagon called a prudent deterrent?
As you know, as a matter of long-standing policy, I just won't discuss military operations.
The Pentagon has described this military operation. I'm not asking. The only thing I'm asking you to do is tell us whether the president was apprised of it and considers this a necessary step up, because it certainly seems out of tone with what you've been conveying to us here, which is this is a serious problem, but not one that requires necessarily anything other than a diplomatic response.
I think you can assume that what the president said to you is ongoing and valid, that the president continues to believe that the matter with North Korea can be resolved through diplomatic means, that does not mean that the United States will always have contingencies and make certain that the contingencies are viable.